Padre Pio warned us. He said it clearly more than once, to the priests who assisted him, to the faithful who came to confess, to the bishops who doubted him. He warned that there is a sin hiding in Catholic homes, one that wears the face of virtue, one that kneels at Mass, one that says the rosary every evening. And yet it is silently destroying the marriage, drying up the husband's heart, and closing every channel of divine grace in the household. That sin is not adultery. It is not laziness. It is not even missing Sunday Mass. It is the unforgiven grudge. And Padre Pio said that this hidden poison, buried deep in a wife's heart, does something most people never expect. It reaches the husband, not through words, not through arguments, through the spiritual realm itself. Today, I'm going to tell you what Padre Pio saw, what the Vatican archives confirm, and what 3 Catholic women discovered, too late in 2 cases, just in time in the 3rd. I am Margaret Ashford, and I have been a Catholic all my 62 years. I have seen marriages crumble. I have watched women, devout, praying, rosary-carrying women lose their husbands not to another woman, but to a cold silence that grew between them like frost on a window, and for decades I could not understand why. Until I read the testimonies of Padre Pio's spiritual directors, and the pattern became unmistakable. Stay with me, because what you are about to hear may be the most important spiritual truth you have never been told. Let me start with a warning Padre Pio gave in the confessional in San Giovanni Rotondo in the winter of 1949. A woman came to him. We know her only as Lucia from the documents preserved by the Capuchin friars. And she knelt before him, listing her sins. Padre Pio listened in silence. Then, before she had finished, he stopped her. He said, "You are holding something that does not belong to you." She was confused. She said she had confessed everything. And Padre Pio replied with words that were recorded by the priest standing nearby. "The grudge against your husband is not yours to keep. It belongs to God to judge and to mercy to heal. Until you release it, every prayer you make rises only as far as the ceiling of your bitterness." Lucia began to weep. She admitted it. 5 years earlier, her husband had humiliated her in public in front of family members, and she had never, not truly, forgiven him. She had said the words. She had continued life as normal. But deep inside, the wound had calcified into something else. Something that Padre Pio, with his ability to read souls, recognized immediately. Hold on, because this is just the beginning of what Padre Pio discovered about this hidden sin. The most terrifying detail is coming in a moment. What Padre Pio saw in Lucia's soul was not simply bitterness, it was a spiritual obstruction. He described it to his confessor, Father Agostino, using an image that Father Agostino later wrote in his personal diary. He said, "The unforgiven grudge sits in the spiritual body of the woman like a stone lodged in a river. The water, which represents grace, continues to flow, but it flows around the stone, never through it. And downstream, where the husband stands spiritually, the flow of grace that should reach him through the sacrament of marriage is reduced to a trickle. The man does not know why he feels spiritually dry. He does not understand why prayer feels empty, why he begins to disconnect from faith, why a coldness settles into his chest that no amount of effort seems to cure. He simply dries up, and the wife, who is carrying the stone, does not understand either. She is praying. She is doing the right things. But Padre Pio saw what neither of them could see. The grudge was blocking the grace that was meant to flow through their marriage covenant. I want to share something personal here. When I first read Father Agostino's diary, I found it referenced in a collection of Padre Pio testimonies I borrowed from our parish library years ago. I sat with the book in my hands for a long time, because I recognized what he was describing, not in my marriage, but in my parents. My father was a good man, a hard-working man, but there was always a cold distance between him and my mother that I could never quite explain as a child. My mother prayed. She went to Mass. She wore her brown scapular, but there was something she carried that she never talked about, something that happened before I was born, involving my father's sister. A terrible argument, words spoken that could not be taken back. My mother said she had forgiven it, but the frost never fully left their home. Not until much later, and by then so much had dried up between them that could never be recovered. That is why I am telling you this today, not to frighten you, but because Padre Pio's warning is not a condemnation, it is a mercy. He saw the wound and he offered the remedy, and the remedy is not what most people expect. Now let me tell you about 3 women whose stories were collected and documented by the spiritual directors of the Padre Pio Foundation in the decades following his canonization. The first is a woman from County Cork in Ireland. I will call her Bridget, as her real name was not published. Bridget had been married for 14 years. Her husband, a devout Catholic named Patrick, had in the 7th year of their marriage made a serious financial decision without consulting her. He invested their savings in a venture that failed, and they lost almost everything they had built together. Bridget told the spiritual counselor who documented her case that she had forgiven Patrick. She said it quickly, confidently. She had forgiven him. She had told him so. She had continued to be a good wife. But the counselor, a priest who had studied under one of Padre Pio's direct disciples, asked her a question that stopped her cold. He asked, "When you are at Mass and the priest says the Our Father, and you come to the words as we forgive those who trespass against us, what do you feel in your body at that moment?" Bridget could not answer. She began to cry, because at that moment, every Sunday, without realizing it, a small fist of anger clenched in her chest. She had never connected it to Patrick. She had simply thought it was the exhaustion of life, the weight of responsibility. But the priest recognized it. That clenched fist was the unforgiven grudge. It had a home in her body, in her spiritual body, and it was doing exactly what Padre Pio described, blocking grace. Patrick, in those 7 years since the financial disaster, had slowly lost his warmth. He was not cruel, he was not absent, but he was, Bridget's word, hollow, like a man who had stopped expecting anything from prayer, like a man whose spiritual heart was slowly drying up. The priest gave Bridget something to do, not a complicated prayer, not a retreat, something so simple that she almost refused to believe it could work. I will tell you what it was before this video ends. But first, I need to tell you about the second woman, because her story reveals something even more disturbing about what the unforgiven grudge can do when it is held not just for years, but for decades. Her name, in the documentation, is Dorothy. She was from a suburb of Liverpool, 61 years old at the time she sought spiritual counsel, married for 38 years. Her husband was named Thomas, and by all accounts he had been a devoted Catholic early in their marriage. Active in the parish, faithful at Mass, a man who prayed the rosary with the family every Friday night. By the time Dorothy came to the spiritual counselor, Thomas had not been to Mass in 12 years. He had not prayed in 9. He had told Dorothy quietly, without drama, that he simply no longer felt anything when he tried to pray, that God felt distant, that the faith he once had was gone, and he did not know where it went or how to get it back. Dorothy was devastated. She had been praying for him every day. She had lit candles at the shrine, offered masses for his return, asked the saints to intercede, and nothing. Thomas remained spiritually dry, spiritually empty, year after year. The counselor who spoke with Dorothy was one who had made a particular study of Padre Pio's teachings on marital grace. And he asked Dorothy a question that the earlier counselor had also asked Bridget. He asked about the words of the Our Father, and he also asked something more specific. Is there anyone in your husband's family, mother, sibling, anyone, toward whom you have ever felt a sustained anger that you have not fully resolved? Dorothy went pale. Because yes, there was. Thomas's mother, a woman named Edith, had, in the second year of their marriage, done something deeply hurtful to Dorothy. She had spread a false rumor among the extended family. It had damaged Dorothy's reputation, strained relationships, caused pain that took years to fade. Dorothy had sat across from Edith at Christmas dinners for 3 decades. She had been polite, she had been civil. She had told herself she had forgiven, but the counselor, as he listened, knew what he was hearing. The unforgiven grudge toward Thomas's mother had calcified over 38 years into something enormous. And because it was directed at someone connected to Thomas, someone who was part of the spiritual household of their marriage, it had acted like a spiritual wall between Thomas's soul and the grace that should have sustained him. Wait, because what the counselor told Dorothy next is something that the church rarely explains clearly. This is the detail that changes everything. Padre Pio taught his spiritual directors something that appears in multiple recorded testimonies. He said that in the sacrament of marriage, the husband and wife become one spiritual body, not just one flesh, as Scripture says, but one channel of grace. What flows through one flows or fails to flow to the other. When the wife carries an unforgiven grudge, it does not only affect her, it constricts the channel. And the husband, who may have no idea that the grudge even exists, who may have had nothing to do with the original wound, begins to experience its effects spiritually. He dries up, his prayer grows cold, his faith weakens, his heart, which was once open to God, begins to close, not out of malice, but out of spiritual starvation. He is not receiving what the covenant of marriage was meant to provide, and he cannot explain why. This was not a theory for Padre Pio. He saw it directly in the spiritual bodies of the men and women who came to his confessional. He could read souls. He could see blockages and wounds that the people themselves could not see. And repeatedly, in case after case, he found this pattern: a husband whose faith was failing, whose heart was drying up, and a wife who was carrying somewhere deep and hidden an unforgiven wound. I have to pause here and tell you something I have experienced myself. Many years ago, before I fully understood this teaching, I held a grudge against my brother-in-law, my late husband Robert's brother, for something he had done that I believed was a genuine betrayal of our family. I prayed every day. I went to Mass. I said all the right prayers. But I noticed, and I could not explain it at the time, that Robert became quieter in his faith during those years. He still went to Mass with me, but there was a flatness to him that I could not reach, a spiritual dullness. I thought it was stress or age or the pressures of his work. It was only after I finally, truly, fully released the grudge against his brother, through a process I will describe later, that something in Robert changed, almost immediately. He began praying again with more attention. He began asking me about the readings at Mass, something he had not done in years. He told me one evening, with no idea of the spiritual connection I had made, that he felt like a weight had lifted off him, like the air had cleared. I never told him what I had done. I did not need to. Padre Pio was right. Now let me tell you about the third woman, because her story is the one with the outcome that was different, and her story is the reason I believe this message can genuinely change something for you today. Her name in the documentation is Agnes. She was from Boston, Massachusetts, 54 years old, married for 29 years to a man named Gerald. Gerald, unlike Thomas or Patrick, had not lost his faith. But Agnes described him using the same word that Bridget had used about Patrick: hollow. He was present, he was faithful, he was kind. But there was a flatness to him that had grown over the years. A spiritual emptiness, a disconnection from deep prayer, a tendency to go through the motions of faith without the fire that had once been there. Agnes had noticed it growing gradually over many years, and she could not pinpoint when it had started. The counselor asked her the usual questions, and then he asked her something specific. Is there something from the past that you revisited in your thoughts regularly? Something involving Gerald that caused you pain? Something that you had decided was forgiven, but that you still think about with a residue of anger or sadness? Agnes thought carefully, and then she said, yes, there is one thing. From the very beginning of their marriage, Gerald had failed to support her during a conflict with her own family. A serious conflict, one that had isolated her for a period and caused her real suffering. She had expected him to stand by her side. He had stayed neutral, and that neutrality, that absence of protection in her hour of need, had wounded her in a way that she had never fully named. She had convinced herself it was simply his personality, a man who avoided conflict. She had lowered her expectation and moved on. But the counselor recognized that she had not truly forgiven that original wound. She had accommodated it. She had managed it. But the stone was still in the river. What makes Agnes's story different is what happened next. The counselor gave her the same instruction he had given Bridget. A specific, simple spiritual exercise rooted in Padre Pio's teaching, and Agnes did it, fully, with great effort and tears. But she did it, and the result was not subtle. Within 3 months, Gerald, without any external reason or explanation, began to change. He started waking early to pray, something he had not done since the first year of their marriage. He asked Agnes to start saying the rosary together again, which they had abandoned for over a decade. He told her, over dinner one evening, that he felt something had returned, that he had been missing for a long time. He could not name it, but it was there. The spiritual channel had reopened. Agnes wept when she told this to the counselor in their follow-up session, not only because Gerald had changed, but because she realized how long the stone had been in the river. How many years of grace had been reduced to a trickle. How much could have been different? She did not dwell in guilt. The counselor was very clear that guilt was not the appropriate response, but she carried a profound sense of what was possible and what had been prevented and what was now finally flowing again. This is the moment in this video where I need to tell you something that may feel uncomfortable. If your husband is spiritually dry, if the man you married is hollow where he once had fire, I am not saying it is your fault. I'm not saying you are the cause of his spiritual state. Marriage is complex. There are many factors. Padre Pio himself never reduced it to a simple formula, but he did warn, clearly and repeatedly, that the unforgiven grudge in a wife's heart is one of the most powerful and most overlooked spiritual forces in a marriage. And if there is any chance at all, that you are carrying something buried and unresolved, then what I am about to tell you is worth every minute of your time. Padre Pio taught his spiritual directors a distinction that is essential to understand. He distinguished between the forgiveness of the mouth and the forgiveness of the soul. The forgiveness of the mouth is what we say. We say, I have forgiven you. We mean it in the sense that we intend no revenge, we harbor no open hostility, we continue life. But the forgiveness of the soul is something different. It is a deep, interior release of the wound, a letting go that takes place not in words, but in the spiritual substance of the person. And Padre Pio said that God honors both, but that only the forgiveness of the soul removes the stone from the river. How do you know the difference? He taught a very specific test. He said, go before the Blessed Sacrament, or if that is not possible, go before a crucifix, and bring to mind the person you believe you have forgiven. Do not bring pleasant memories. Bring the memory of the specific wound, the specific moment of pain. Hold it in your heart for 30 seconds and observe what happens in your body. If peace remains, even a quiet, sorrowful peace, the forgiveness is deep. If a physical sensation arises, tension in the chest, tightness in the throat, a clenching in the stomach, a surge of heat, then the stone is still there. The forgiveness has not yet reached the soul. This is the test. It is simple. It is honest. And most people who try it discover to their surprise that there are wounds they believed fully healed that are still very much alive. Now, I need to tell you about the moment that changes everything in understanding what Padre Pio taught, because it is not what you expect. The most terrifying part of Padre Pio's teaching on this subject is not the spiritual damage the unforgiven grudge causes. It is this. He said that the woman who carries an unforgiven grudge while practicing outward piety is in a particularly dangerous spiritual position, not because God condemns her, he does not, but because the very acts of devotion she performs, the Mass, the Rosary, the prayers, all of which are meant to open her soul to grace, are passing through a channel that is partially blocked. She receives less than she should. She grows slowly, invisibly, in ways she cannot measure, and because her piety gives her a sense of spiritual safety, she is less likely to examine what is beneath. She does not feel the urgency to look deeper. The stone sits in the river year after year, and the faithful woman has no idea. Padre Pio described this in a confession with a woman in the 1950s. A woman whose name was never recorded, but whose exchange with him was witnessed and later documented by a friar who was present. The woman came to him proud of her prayer life. She listed her devotions with the quiet confidence of someone who knew she was doing the right things. And Padre Pio listened. And then he said to her gently, "You have built a beautiful house, but one of the walls has a crack. And every winter the cold comes through that crack, and you light more fires to compensate. But the answer is not more fires. The answer is to repair the crack." She did not understand at first. He explained. The crack was a grudge against her sister held for 11 years. The fires were her increasing devotions, unconsciously trying to compensate for the grace that was leaking. He told her that if she repaired the crack, and if she achieved the forgiveness of the soul, not just the mouth, she would find that a single candle gave more warmth than all her previous fires combined. That image has stayed with me for years. A single candle giving more warmth than all the fires, because it speaks to something I have seen in the Catholic women I have known throughout my life, devout, sincere, faithful women who are somehow spiritually cold. Not cold toward God, cold toward themselves, cold in their marriages, as if something is always slightly off, always slightly less than it should be. And now I believe I understand why, at least in some of those cases. Let me tell you now about the practical teaching that Padre Pio gave to his spiritual directors for cases like these. Because a warning without a remedy is not mercy. And Padre Pio was always, at his core, a man of mercy. He taught a process of what he called interior forgiveness, and it has 3 stages. The first stage he called naming. Before you can forgive a wound at the level of the soul, you must name it precisely. Not generally, not "I forgive what happened," but specifically, "I forgive the moment when, on this day, this person did this specific thing, and I felt this specific pain." Padre Pio said that vague forgiveness is like applying a bandage to a wound whose location you cannot find. It covers something, but it does not heal. The naming requires honesty and sometimes courage, because we have often buried the precise wound beneath years of accommodation. We have told ourselves a simplified version. The naming forces us to go back to the original moment, the original pain, and stand in front of it without looking away. The second stage he called offering. After naming the wound precisely, you bring it deliberately, consciously, before the crucifix. You hold it up as you would hold a broken object before a craftsman who can repair it. And you say, in whatever words feel true to you, "This wound is too heavy for me to carry and too complex for me to resolve by my own effort. I place it here at the foot of the cross, where it belongs." Padre Pio taught that the crucifixion of Jesus was not only a payment for sin, it was, in the spiritual reality, a gathering of all human wounds, all unforgiven injuries, all accumulated pain. When you offer your wound to the cross, you are not pretending it did not happen. You are acknowledging that it belongs to a larger reality than your private experience, and that one who understands suffering far more than you do has already embraced it. The third stage he called releasing. This is the hardest. After naming and offering, you release the claim. The claim is the hidden thing, the part of you that, without consciously choosing it, maintains a spiritual account, a registry of wrong, a record of debt. Padre Pio said that the unforgiven grudge is ultimately a claim. This person owes me something they have not paid, an apology, an acknowledgement, a reckoning. And the spiritual problem is not only the pain, it is the claim. Because as long as the claim exists, the wound cannot close. The release is the deliberate interior decision to cancel the debt, not because the other person deserves it, not because the wound was not real, but because, and this is what Padre Pio emphasized, the claim belongs to God, not to you. Justice belongs to God. The accounting belongs to God. And when you release the claim, you are not saying that what happened was acceptable. You are saying that you trust God to handle what you cannot. This three-stage process, naming, offering, releasing, is what the counselors gave to Bridget, to Dorothy, and to Agnes. Bridget found it moderately helpful, but struggled with the releasing. Dorothy found it transformative almost immediately. Agnes used it over a period of 6 weeks, returning to the exercise repeatedly until she felt the stone move. All three women reported the same experience once the process was complete, a physical sensation of lightness, as if something they had been carrying, something they had stopped noticing because they had carried it for so long, was no longer there. And in 2 of the 3 cases, the change in the husband followed within months. There is something I want to address directly, because I know some of you are thinking it. You may be thinking, what if the grudge is justified? What if my husband genuinely did something wrong, something serious, something that most people would agree deserved lasting anger? I want to answer this honestly, the way Padre Pio would have answered it. He did not say that the grudge was always unjustified. He did not say that the person who caused the wound was innocent. He said that the spiritual damage of carrying the grudge falls on the one who carries it. The wound was done to you. The grudge, however, is something you are doing to yourself and to your marriage, and through the covenant of marriage to your husband's spiritual life. The severity of the original offense does not change the spiritual mechanics. If anything, the more serious the offense, the more important the deep forgiveness, because the stone is larger and it blocks more. I will also say this, because Padre Pio said it and I believe it is essential. Interior forgiveness does not require reconciliation. It does not require trust. It does not require restoring a damaged relationship to what it was. It does not require pretending the pain did not happen or that the person who caused it has earned your confidence again. Interior forgiveness is a private act of the soul, done before God, for the sake of your own spiritual freedom and the grace of your marriage. You can forgive a person interiorly while still maintaining appropriate distance from them. The forgiveness is not about what happens between you and the other person. It is about what happens between you and God. This is what most people misunderstand about Padre Pio's teaching on forgiveness. They think forgiveness is something done for the benefit of the person who wronged them. It is not. It is something done for the health of the soul that is carrying the wound. And it is something done for the spiritual life of the marriage that is, without either spouse realizing it, being affected by the blockage. Now I want to bring this home, not with theory, but with a question for you to sit with privately, before God, without judgment. When was the last time you felt genuinely, deeply at peace with every person who has ever hurt you? Not just tolerant of them, not just civil toward them, but truly at peace? For most of us, if we are honest, the answer is not recent. There are names in our past, perhaps even in our present, that carry, when we bring them to mind, a small residue of something unresolved, a heaviness, a tightening. It may be something that happened 10 years ago, 20 years ago, before your children were born, before your marriage began. It may be something involving your husband's family, or your own family, or a situation that intersected with your marriage in ways you have never quite untangled. Padre Pio said, "Those residues matter. They are not small. In the spiritual realm, they are significant, and they do not stay contained in your private interior. They flow, or fail to flow, through every spiritual relationship you carry." Here is the moment when I have to tell you something I discovered about my own life, late in my years, that I wish I had understood decades earlier. When Robert passed, I went through his personal things, his notebooks, his letters, the quiet, private evidence of a man's inner life. And I found a journal entry from a period in our marriage that I've already described, the years when I was carrying the grudge against his brother. In that entry, Robert had written simply, "I feel like I have lost something, and I do not know what it is. I pray, and the words go nowhere. I go to Mass, and I am there in body, but I am absent somewhere else. I do not know what is wrong with me. I thought I was faithful. I thought my soul was in good order, but something is dry, something is hollow." He never told me. He never mentioned it. He thought it was his own failing, his own spiritual inadequacy. He had no idea that his wife, the woman he loved, the woman who shared his covenant before God, was unknowingly blocking the grace that was meant to sustain him. When I read those words, I wept for a long time. Not in guilt. I was not fully aware at the time of the spiritual mechanics I am describing to you now, but in the sadness of understanding, in the recognition that so much of our spiritual life is invisible to us, and that what we carry in our hearts reaches further than we know. That is why I am here today. That is why I'm telling you what Padre Pio saw, what his spiritual directors documented, what the faithful women of Bridget's and Dorothy's and Agnes's stories experienced. Because I believe that somewhere among you watching this, there is a woman who loves her husband, who prays for him faithfully, who lights candles and says novenas and wonders why nothing seems to reach him. And the answer, or part of the answer, is closer than she has ever looked. It is in the stone she has been carrying so long she has forgotten it is there. This is where I want to offer you something real, not a complicated spiritual program, not a retreat you have to travel to. Something you can do tonight, in your own home, before you sleep. Go to wherever you keep your crucifix, on the wall, on the nightstand, in the corner where you pray, and spend 15 minutes, just 15 minutes, do Padre Pio's test first. Bring to mind one by one the people in your husband's world and your own world who have ever caused you pain. Bring the specific memory, not the general feeling. And notice what happens in your body. If there is tightness anywhere, even a small tightness, do not dismiss it. That is where the stone is. And then, for each stone you find, go through the 3 stages. Name it precisely, offer it to the cross, and release the claim. You may not fully complete the releasing in one night. That is normal. The wound may have been there for years, but begin the movement, begin the interior shift. Padre Pio said that even a sincere beginning of interior forgiveness opens the channel. Not fully, not immediately, but measurably. Grace begins to move where it was blocked. And if you find as you sit with this that the stone is too heavy to move on your own, if the wound is deep enough that you cannot yet sincerely release the claim, then bring it to the sacrament of confession. Not to confess holding the grudge as a moral failure, but to ask for the grace of forgiveness, to say, "Father, I am not yet able to release this. I want to, but I cannot reach it on my own. I need grace greater than my own effort, and let the priest give you that grace." Padre Pio himself said that the confessional was not only a place of absolution, it was a place of healing for wounds that a person could not heal alone. I'm asking you today to make a commitment, not to anyone else, not to your husband, not to your priest, not to this channel, to God. I'm asking you to commit to looking honestly at what you carry, to bring the test of the 30 seconds to the memories that still have weight, to begin or to complete the process of interior forgiveness for the wounds that have calcified into stones, not because it will be easy, not because the wound was not real, but because your marriage is a channel of grace, and that channel matters to you, to your husband, to your children and grandchildren who inherit the spiritual climate of your home. Padre Pio saw the marriages that were slowly drying up. He saw the husbands growing hollow, the wives growing cold, the homes where grace had reduced to a trickle. And he saw the moment when a woman, sometimes after years, sometimes after decades, finally released the stone. He described what he saw in that moment using an image that Father Agostino recorded in his diary. He said it was like watching a river, suddenly freed from obstruction, begin to move again. Not a flood. Not a dramatic rush, just the quiet, powerful, natural movement of water that had been waiting patiently for the stone to be removed. That river is your marriage. That stone is yours to release. And the grace that has been waiting is more than enough to restore what the years of blockage have reduced. You were brave enough to watch this to the end. That matters. Something in you knew this message was for you. And if you are still watching now, I want to ask you something. There is a super thanks button below this video. I know that might seem like an odd thing to mention after everything we have just talked about. But the truth is, these revelations, the testimonies of Padre Pio's spiritual directors, the archived cases, the teachings that the Church rarely explains from the pulpit, take real effort to research, to present faithfully, to bring to you in a way that is both doctrinally sound and genuinely useful. When you click Super Thanks, you are not just supporting a channel, you are saying these truths matter. These testimonies of Padre Pio need to keep reaching the women in difficult marriages, the wives who have been praying and wondering why nothing reaches their husbands, the souls who are carrying stones they did not know were there. You are becoming part of the reason those women find this message. That is not a small thing. That is, in its own quiet way, an act of spiritual service. Padre Pio himself said that those who spread divine truth are guardians of grace for souls they will never meet. Whatever you decide about the super thanks, I want to leave you with one final thing. The third stage of Padre Pio's teaching, the releasing, requires trust. Trust that God will handle what you cannot. Trust that justice exists even when you cannot see it. Trust that the covenant of your marriage is held by a grace far stronger than the wounds that have accumulated within it. And trust that the river, once the stone is removed, knows how to flow. Padre Pio never promised that forgiveness would restore everything that had dried up. He did not offer sentimentality or false hope, but he did promise, and Father Agostino recorded this clearly, that where a soul is willing to release what it carries, divine love does not delay. It moves, it fills, it heals, perhaps not in the way you imagined, perhaps not on the timeline you hoped for, but it moves. Your husband's heart is not too dry to receive grace, and you are not too tired to release the stone. Padre Pio is praying for both of you. Now I want to ask you something. Have you ever sat in prayer and realized, truly realized, with that quiet interior honesty that prayer sometimes opens, that a wound you thought was healed was still very much alive? Have you ever done the test I described, brought a specific memory to mind and felt the tightness that told you the stone was still there? Tell me in the comments. Tell me how long you had been carrying it before you realized. Your story might be the thing that gives another woman the courage to look honestly at what she is holding. Leave your answer below and let us hold each other in this truth together. Because Padre Pio said it plainly, the forgiveness that sets one soul free often sets another free as well. And sometimes That other soul is the one sleeping next to you.